You'll use it often. It's worth paying attention to stove features if you're going to live on board. Hi, I'm Carolyn Sherlock, and on this episode of the Boat Galley podcast, I share what you need to consider to make your stove work for you. This episode of the Boat Galley podcast is sponsored by Infinity, the most trusted name in woven vinyl flooring in the marine industry. Since 2008, Infinity has offered boat owners premier flooring options proven to withstand even the most demanding environments. Each of their products is equipped with UV-stable fade resistance and antimicrobial technology, giving them both durability and style that can't be matched. Thinking about kicking carpet to the curb? Make the switch to Infinity and see the difference that true luxury makes. Visit infinitylwv.com and use the coupon code BG20 for 10% off any area rug. Limit one per customer. So let's talk today about choosing a new stove. Now, a while back, I wrote a post about how many of the boats on display at the Annapolis Sailboat Show had small two-burner stoves. And while that might not be much of a problem when cooking on top of the stove, it also made for a small oven. And I have a two-burner stove, probably the smallest one you've ever seen. It's only 18 inches wide, on our current boat, Barefoot Gal. Now, I've learned a lot of different things about stoves and buying one. So let's talk about this. Well, the first thing to know is that, yes, in general, three-burner stoves are larger and therefore have a larger oven than two-burner stoves. However, not all three-burner stoves are large. A number of times people have commented to me about the burners being so close together on a three-burner stove that it was impossible to actually fit 3 pans on the stove. More than a few even had problems with 2 pans. As I researched this further, I think that my Force 10 that I had on our first boat, K-Tall, was a 3-burner, what they call American Standard size. And that's the largest size for 3-burner stoves. I never had a problem with using 3 pans and didn't even know that some of the 3-burner stoves were so small. But yes, they are. I started looking at measurements. Now, if you're looking at stoves in person, and this is going to sound funny, I suggest taking along at least one of your larger pans. By placing it on a burner, you can very quickly see how it will or it won't infringe on using the other burners. Now, if you're looking at stoves online, it can be very hard to find detailed information on burner layout. I spent over an hour looking at several manufacturers' websites and found none. I could find all sorts of overall dimensions and information for installing, but none showing the dimensions of the burners and space between. Nonetheless, that is probably one of the most important factors in how happy you'll be with the stove. And I agree with a number of people who have said there's no point in having 3 burners if you could never use more than one. I recommend going to a boat show or a large chandlery where you can actually see the stoves before you decide to buy them. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is burner BTUs. BTU stands for British Thermal Unit, and it's a measurement of how much heat something puts out. Higher numbers mean more heat. And BTUs are used for propane, compressed natural gas, and alcohol stoves. Now, watts are used for electrical stove, but that's the same concept. Higher is more heat. Now, in general, there are no hard and fast rules on this. You need about 7,000 BTUs to saute effectively. That's like brown meats, stir fry, or to boil a pot of water with any speed. If you plan to use an Omnia stovetop oven, you're going to need a burner with close to 7,000 in order to preheat the oven properly. Many different brands of marine stoves have 1 or more burners with 8 or 9,000 BTUs, and sometimes more. Now, that's great for fast cooking, but it's not so good for slow simmering. These burners are almost impossible to turn down to a nice low setting. They go out before you get them down far enough. I had this problem on K-Tall, and I got what's called a flame tamer to keep from burning everything I made. They cost about $7, and the cheapies work just as well as the really expensive ones. There's a link to one of my favorites in the show notes. Now, the better way to do this thing is to have one burner with low BTUs and at least one with high. A lot of companies will call a low BTU burner a simmer burner. They typically are like 3,000 to 5,000 BTUs. They work really well. When you look at a stove, the larger burners typically have higher BTUs and the smaller burners have lower. Some manufacturers and models have all burners the same size, and usually this means that they are all the same BTUs. Good news is that the spec sheets from every manufacturer that I've ever checked did list the BTUs for the individual burners, often saying something like one 9200 BTU burner and two 3400 BTU burners. Now, my personal preference is to have one higher BTU burner and one lower, but you know how you cook. Okay, let's talk then about whether you need a broiler or not. Many marine ovens come standard with a broiler, but some brands make models with and without. I'm betting a lot of people ask why they'd ever use a broiler. How about if I said I used it on K-Tal almost every day? We didn't have a toaster, and my preferred method of making toast was under the broiler. It's very quick and easy. Admittedly, you can make toast other ways, but given a choice, I'd prefer to have a broiler and do it that way. It's great for bagels and English muffins too. The next thing I'd like to talk about is an oven door. It's important that you can latch the oven door shut so that the movement of the boat doesn't allow it to suddenly pop open. It's bad enough if the oven isn't on and no one is standing in front of the door. Somewhat more annoying if pots are stored in the oven and they slide out. And it is downright dangerous if the oven is on and someone is hit first with the hot door and then by a pan of hot food. If an oven doesn't come with a latch, you'll have to figure something out. The second really nice feature on an oven door is what's called a slide-away door. As the door opens, it slides under the oven. This is a really nice feature for two reasons. The cook doesn't have to lean over a hot door to put food in the oven, look at it, or take it out. And this is a huge safety consideration, considering that it's easy to just slightly lose your balance on a boat. And when the oven is open, it is still balanced if that door goes under the bottom. If you're using the gimbals, opening the door otherwise changes the balance, and the stove will tip towards the cook. That's also a big safety problem. Now let's talk about another thing, enamel ovens. More than one person has told me that they absolutely love the Princess Seaward ovens because they are porcelain enamel lined as opposed to stainless, and thus they hold heat better. Now, I haven't used one to have a personal opinion, but it seems reasonable that dark enamel would be better. I don't know if any other brands have this feature. Most boat ovens that I have ever seen are stainless. Now, let's talk about ignition systems. Most companies make a big deal about the fact that they have some sort of lighter built into the burners and oven. Most people that I know find that these fail frequently, and while they can be fixed, most of us just decide that it's easier to keep a long-nosed butane lighter near the stove and light the burners and oven the old-fashioned way. I certainly wouldn't choose one stove over another because of this feature. Okay, that's it for today about stoves. Thanks for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. Don't forget to subscribe in your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends, and remember, reviews are always appreciated.